Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Anunnaki Star Gods. The Sumerian civilization took shape around 4100 BC, but they continued to thrive for thousands of years. While other civilizations rose up around them, they remained the original cradle of society. The name Sumer meant land of the civilized kings. They lasted until 1750 BC, and the advancements they made in mathematics, writing, and astronomy allowed later civilizations to prosper in a way that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. They also made great leaps and bounds in architecture and engineering. They even divided time into hours and minutes. They essentially elevated human beings from primitive hunters into civilized city dwellers. And the gods they worshipped were the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki have been the source of a lot of skepticism in recent years. Archaeologists say they were nothing but a group of fantasy gods, just like the gods of Olympus or the Egyptian pantheon. However, others believe the Anunnaki were real beings that came to our planet from somewhere else. Some say they originated from Planet X, while others say they came from another dimension, from a world far, far away. But why did they come to Earth in the first place? It was allegedly to enslave the human race so they could mine all the gold from our planet and then leave. Of course, this is just a theory, but there are some shocking coincidences. The ancient Sumerians did seemingly become civilized out of nowhere. People went from using simple rock tools to sculpting cities out of stone. We went from grunting at each other like primitive apes to writing down our feelings and telling epic stories. It does seem like the Sumerians had some help, perhaps by the very gods they worship. What do you think caused the beginning of civilization? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 9. Jesus and Osiris. Jesus Christ and the Egyptian god Osiris may just be the exact same person, or at least the same mythical figure. Osiris was such a big deal in ancient Egypt that he was worshipped for nearly 3,000 years. People didn't stop worshipping him until roughly 30 BC, less than a century before the birth of Christ. It does seem a little suspicious that immediately after Christ was born, Osiris was old news. Then Jesus showed up with an origin story that was almost identical to Osiris. The story of Osiris revolves around how he became the first mummy. He was betrayed by his brother Set, who tricked him into climbing into a coffin. Set then locks the coffin and throws it into a river with Osiris still inside. The casket somehow lodges itself in a tree, which then quickly grows around it. Later, the king of the area orders for the tree to be used in his palace as a pillar, unaware that the coffin holding Osiris is held inside it. Then, with the help of Anubis, the god of the dead, Osiris's partner Isis discovers that her love is trapped within the king's pillar. She manages to bring the coffin with her back to Egypt, where she consecrates the pillar with linen and myrrh. When Set finds out that Isis plans to bring Osiris back from the dead with magic, he cuts the corpse into many pieces and scatters them all over Egypt. However, Isis finds every piece of Osiris except for his genitals, which had already been eaten by the fish in the Nile. Isis then brings Osiris back from the dead. It was his journey of death, resurrection, and redemption that allowed ordinary Egyptians to become immortal. In other words, Osiris died so that everyone else could live eternally. His story is similar to how Jesus Christ died so that his followers could reach eternal salvation. Many religious scholars believe the Christian narrative took the Egyptian story of Osiris and tweaked it. God sent his only son to earth to die, allowing everyone else to live forever. Both religions are clearly solving the same issue as to how the human soul can reach immortality. Number 8. Fallen Angels in Ireland. In ancient Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann were said to be the descendants of the angels that fell from heaven. In all three main Abrahamic religions, the fallen angels were cast down to earth and expelled from heaven during Satan's rebellion against God. But what happened to them afterwards is a mystery. Some stories say they became twisted and preyed on human women, but in Ireland it's believed that they turned into gods of their own. Irish mythology contains a multitude of stories about the Tuatha De Danann, or the tribe of the gods. They were depicted as kings and queens, as well as great healers and majestic heroes. They were even sometimes shown as beautiful, shining souls with supernatural powers. They lived in the otherworld, a kind of a mirror realm, but they were still able to interact with humans. To make sense of these godlike beings, medieval authors began to describe the Tuatha De Danann as the remnants of the fallen angels. They were neither good nor evil, but simply the last traces of angelic blood who were skilled in magic. Some say the fallen angels slowly lost their powers as they mixed with humans. Over time, they devolved into a tribe of semi-magic men and women, then lost their power altogether and became myths. And now for number 8. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Todd Tallman for the super thanks. This is so helpful for us to keep making more videos for you all and creating more fun things. So big thank you to Todd. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join us for more videos about mysterious discoveries and strange history. Number 7. The Three Wise Men. In the story of the Three Wise Men, they follow the Star of Bethlehem to witness the coming of Christ. These mysterious Magi from the East follow the star to the baby Jesus and shower him with great gifts. For the past 400 years, scholars have been trying to understand if there was a real celestial event that inspired the story of the Star of Bethlehem. Some have guessed it could have been a supernova or a comet, while others say it might have been a meteor shower, but the evidence has never added up, and no one's ever been able to say what the Star of Bethlehem was. However, scientist Michael Molnar believes he may have found an answer. Michael believes the Three Wise Men never chased a star like it says in the biblical story, but rather traveled to Bethlehem because of a horoscope. Michael claims the Magi were ancient astrologers who safeguarded secret knowledge of the heavens. They watched the movements of the stars and the planets, and they used the symbols of the zodiac to convince ordinary people that they could see the future based on changes in the constellations. If correct, it would mean the Magi were astrologers and astronomers and glorified magicians. If they really were watching the stars 2,000 years ago, they would have predicted that on April 17th, 6 BC, an alignment would occur. The sun would pass into the constellation of Aries, and for a brief period of time, Jupiter, Saturn, the sun, and the moon would all align. Based on what they saw in the stars, the Magi traveled to Judea expecting to find someone born with incredible powers. And lo and behold, they found Jesus. This could be the real origin story of Jesus' birth. A few astrologers listening to their horoscope. Number 6. Hercules and Samson. Hercules is the most famous legendary strongman from ancient times. Most historians agree that he was likely a real man during the Stone Age, someone who completed a series of fantastic deeds and became immortalized as the world's first hero. Then, over the next 10,000 years, his story changed and grew. One of the versions of Hercules might be none other than the biblical warrior we know as Samson. The story of Samson can be found in the book of Judges between chapters 13 and 16. He is described as being blessed with great strength to help him against his enemies. According to the Bible, he killed a lion with his bare hands, and he was directly responsible for the death of his first wife. These are just a couple of things he has in common with Hercules. Both men are also associated with two-headed dogs. Hercules killed the two-headed canine Orthus, who guarded the giant Geryon's cattle. Samson tied jackals together in pairs of 2 as part of his plot against the Philistines. And lastly, both Samson and Hercules were undone by women described in their stories as destroyers of men. Samson was betrayed by Delilah, and Hercules was betrayed by a woman named Deianira. They almost didn't stand a chance. Number 5. Jesus and the Freemasons. Freemasonry, as we know it today, originated in England in the early part of the 1700s. It's difficult to say exactly where it came from, but many historians believe the Freemasons of the 18th century were descendants from the builders' guilds that operated in Europe during the Middle Ages. The members of the various builders' guilds were the men behind the creation of Europe's great cathedrals and other pieces of medieval architecture. There are also those who say Jesus Christ himself was once a member of the Freemasons, only a very long time ago when the organization was first established. Freemasonry could go as far back as Old Testament times. It's never been proved, but there is speculation that some of the first great architects and engineers were part of a secret society of Masons. Even those who built King Solomon's temple 3,000 years ago had to acquire their knowledge from somewhere, likely from the mystic teachings of the ancient Egyptians. Passing along the knowledge of building, mathematics, and other similar sciences may have been restricted to a small elite group of builders. These would have been the original Freemasons. And as you may know already, Jesus himself was a carpenter. According to the Bible, Jesus Christ lived in a tiny city called Nazareth, and he was called a Nazarene by his peers. But archaeological records show no such town existing in Galilee at that time. Some have suggested the Nazarene was the name of a secret society or order in northern Palestine 2,000 years ago. The suggestion here is that Jesus was one of the first leaders of what would become modern Freemasonry, a league of exceptional builders and teachers. But after his death, those in power covered up the truth. Number 4. Sargon and Moses. In ancient Assyria, there was a myth of a king named Sargon. His mother was a high priestess who conceived the child in secret. She placed her son in a reed basket and sent him along the Euphrates River, hoping that someone would find the boy and raise him as their own. The river carried young Sargon to the home of a common laborer, who raised him well. Then, in his youth, Sargon was visited by Ishtar, goddess of storms and warfare. The goddess loved young Sargon, and so she helped him become the king of the Akkadian Empire. He was the first ruler of the United Akkadian Empire, reigning between 2334 BC and 2279 BC. It's unclear how much of his origin story is true, but Sargon was definitely a real ruler, and he was king for 55 years. Hearing Sargon's story, you might notice how close it is to the story of a certain character from the Bible. Moses was also abandoned by his mother, and he was put in a reed basket that was sent sailing down the Nile River. Moses was discovered by the Pharaoh's daughter as she bathed, and he would later lead God's people out of Israel. It's hard not to see the similarities between the two stories. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Number 3. The Plagues and the Gods of Egypt. According to the Old Testament, God sent 10 devastating plagues to ravage the people of Egypt. In the book of Exodus, the evil Pharaoh refuses to release the chosen people of God from their captivity. So, as Moses prophesied, God unleashed 10 horrors upon the land. But some biblical experts believe the 10 plagues were all references to ancient Egyptian gods. Tom Meyer, a professor at Shasta Bible College in California, recently explained the links between the plagues and the deities of the Egyptian pantheon. He says the Bible may have been using symbolism as a way to describe how the one true God, Yahweh, would destroy each of the Egyptian gods. It didn't have anything to do with plagues, but was about one religion being dominant over the other. For example, the Nile turning into blood could have been meant to represent Yahweh overcoming the god Osiris. This is because the ancient Egyptians believed the Nile was the bloodstream of Osiris. The plague of frogs was related to the frog goddess Heqet. The plague of flies showed the power of God over Hatchit, goddess of the marshes. The plague of pestilence upon animals was directed at the powerful god of strength and war, Apis, like the bull. And the plague of darkness struck directly at the heart of Egyptian religion. It suggested God could snuff out the most powerful Egyptian deity of them all, Ra, the sun itself. Number 2. Little Red Riding Hood. In the Western world, Little Red Riding Hood is a famous story about a young girl who faces off against a big bad wolf. It was originally written as a cautionary tale to travelers, warning them of the dangers lurking in remote and desolate woodlands. In Japan, there is an almost identical story with a creature that seems to mirror the big bad wolf. This creature is called the Okuri Inu. The original story of Little Red Riding Hood likely came from ancient Greece. It centered on a young virgin who was supposed to be sacrificed to a wolf monster. However, a passing hero saw what was about to happen and saved the girl from the ravenous creature. The story has seen many alterations over the years, but the core of it has remained the same. It wasn't until the 17th century that Italian writers turned it into a fairy tale and added the girl's grandmother. The Japanese tale of the Okuri Inu isn't much different. The Okuri Inu is a supernatural wolf that lurks within the dark mountain passes and lonely forests of rural Japan. Legends say the hound follows travelers through the forest waiting for them to fall down, and when they do, it devours them. These stories aren't exactly identical, but they do share the same hidden message. Both stories were cautionary tales from medieval travelers to warn of the dangers of nightly journeys. Specifically, the Okuri Inu and the Big Bad Wolf are metaphors for predatory men who attack lone women that travel alone at night. Number 1. Utnapishtim and Noah. The story of the Great Flood that's told in the Book of Genesis is almost identical to the flood account told in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Some scholars believe the Bible's Noah is an imitation of Utnapishtim from ancient Babylonia. And yet both stories told in these two ancient tomes may have been referring to the same real event. Many scholars agree there was a global flooding disaster that took place in ancient times. The issue has been trying to pinpoint when it happened, where it happened, and which areas were affected. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells a story of a flood that extinguished all life. The Babylonian god Ea started the flood because he'd grown sick of the wickedness of men. But Ea allowed an ark to be built to safeguard the animals so that some of his creations could be saved. A man named Utnapishtim built a giant ark so that he could protect the animals of the world and start fresh when the floodwaters receded. This is a pretty obvious copy of Noah's story, only it was told over 500 years earlier in 2000 BC. So who copied whom? Thanks for watching! Which of these historical coincidences did you find the most interesting? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!